I'm Tony Ruiz of Gold Derby here with Ellen Mirojnick and John W. Glaser, the costume designers for Bridgerton. Uh, and I guess the first question, and either one of you can take this, is Bridgerton one of those kind of like dream jobs for a costume designer? Because us looking at those outfits is fun. So I can only imagine that it would be really fun to come up with them.
I can answer that for both of us. It was yes
And yes,
and yes.
yes, and yes, it was the greatest adventure I think one could ever dream of.
Greatest unexpected adventure.
That's well put, John. Well put.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why unexpected? I'm curious.
Because you never really know what you're about to embark on. And we didn't even have a script. We just had some outlines. And that showed us the large prospect of it. And we needed to approach it in a certain way that we hadn't approached anything else, or at least I hadn't approached anything else because of its volume. And we were never hindered or stopped in our quest to do what we were doing. So
And that kind of
roadblocks, yeah.
in that kind of way, we do this wonderful job that we're really blessed to be able to do. And every job is not the same at all, never the same. The people are different, the expectation is different, the requirements of the job are different. In this particular job, as huge and as challenging as it was from the onset, we were well supported, we were encouraged, we were never taken to task in terms of, oh, let me see more, let me see less, let me see something different, let me, people have opinions and you always have to work with them. We were in a very rarefied, appreciative situation whereby our producers were fierce and supportive at the same time. And doing a project that had so many components, as well as having to build a costume house to hold these components, basically. I mean, I think that we were in a rarefied, blessed state after in hindsight now, because you don't get an opportunity that is as adventurous, challenging, fulfilling, and amazing as that. It doesn't come along. It just, we're both doing this a very long time. It doesn't come along that often.
I'm curious because one of the aspects of the show obviously is the anachronisms in terms of like the music and in the casting. Did that anachronism carry over into the costumes, or was it, or were you going straight for the type of period that it takes place in?
No, it's basically the whole thing is always in an inaccurate way. Mm-hmm. That is how we work with Shondaland. Shondaland has a particular way in which they like to create and have audiences view their storytelling. And without a question, I mean, we were hired first, and we needed to be able to create a world whereby it was that specific. Our world is as everything equals everything. The music equals what it looks like. The production design equals what the whole world looks like. The costumes, there's nothing, I think when watching it, you never separate anything. I think everything, the casting is beautiful and it's diverse, but we never thought anything of that diversity to be unusual.
No.
We, not at all, not on any circumstance. So I think that it's a piece that is fantastical, and it is based in a period of time, but we were given the opportunities to interpret the stories the way would be best suited to telling the stories and having it be part of this world creation that is a little bit different than other period pieces.
We were given the liberty, which is nice to do that.
Is there?
I have to say that, you know, when you think about Shondaland and how diverse it is, that when we were fitting Regé, and we talked about his character and like who he was, but then later on, his aunt came in, Lady Danbury, and she was the same race as him, which surprised me because I thought, oh, I would never have thought that. I would have thought she would have been a different race. And that's how, I guess I'm trying to say how diverse everything was, how we approached everything, how the information came to us. It was always unexpected and not the norm, just like the entire production was for us. Something that you hadn't experienced before.
And
so,
it was, and it was,
so,
we were there to expect the unexpected.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say in 2 words. Yeah. No, because when you expect something or you base it on something that you've done, you can make assumptions. But in this case, you learn very quickly not to assume anything. It was all going to be different all the time.
Did you at any point how did you work with the actors? Because I can imagine that in these types of garments, it probably informs the character quite a lot in terms of how they move and how they carry themselves. So what were your kind of your interactions with the actors like?
Oh, it was very, very straightforward. Our interaction with the actors was kind of blissful because these actors came into the room, into the fitting rooms, in the principal cast, and were actually young and expected a Jane Austen kind of world. And what I mean by that is something that we've seen before and not something that was a bit unpredictable. And so once they understood that this was not going to be a show that they had seen before, this was not going to be a typical period piece, they just gave themselves over in a way that was it was 100% present, 100% collaborative, and actually so open for more. They wanted to engage in a way that it gave them an understanding and also a liberty again to be able to do things that they might not have thought of before, to be able to express themselves in different ways. They understood a modern twist, a modern layer that was being layered in terms of the entire show. And it gave them just a slightly different perspective. So I think that the actors, we're usually their first stop. And with that being their first stop, it informs everything that they do thereafter. So it informs the color of their hair to be in our world. It informs how they walk, how they talk, how they sit, how they look at another person. It just is, it's so much information that they get, and they had so many pieces of clothing and costume that it informed so much. Nicola, who plays Penelope, thought the first time, I think that she's said this in the press, the first time she was coming to a fitting, she lived in Ireland at the time, and she was booked, and she thought it was only going to be an hour. She said, sure, I'll do that for an hour. And her agent said, no, it's 4 hours. And she said, what? And the 4 hours became probably 5 hours at the time. But she was thrilled because she learned so much and was exposed to so much that it was maybe even a little bit too much at the time. What we didn't like spoon feed them at all.
Into the deep end of the pool.
Yeah, jump right in.
It overwhelmed them sometimes, and it also, like us, made us question or made them question all their previous assumptions about the character and how they would look.
What colors they would wear, how they would.
It was always different than what you expected.
Yeah, I want to ask about some of those colors because, over the course of the season, take Penelope, for example, with the yellow. When do those ideas come? Are those just things that pop into your head? I mean, what is the thought process that goes behind the creation of some of these looks that have now become, kind of synonymous with these characters?
Go ahead, Johnny.
Well, the colors for Penelope are actually written in the book and in the I don't know if they're written in the book, but they are mentioned in the script.
No, they were written in the book. I think they were written in kind of not a very flattering way.
And that gives us a starting point. If you know that Penelope is bright yellow, a little garish, and she's from the Featherington families, that tells you that her mother picked out her clothes, so her mother probably wore colors in that range. And that is like the basis for it, right? I'm not a very good speaker. And then you have to compare them to the Bridgertons, who we know are old society. We kept the Bridgertons, we kept them thinking about them as being like the Tiffany family. So they would be subtle colors that weren't audacious, they were understated. They had nothing to prove. They had their money, they had their wealth, they had their place
elegance
in society and their elegance. They didn't have to work at it. Where the Featheringtons were trying to be seen, were trying to be noticed, were trying to prove themselves. And so their mother made every effort that she could to make sure that her daughters would be noticed. And by that, she used what we called acid fruit colors. And the Bridgertons were based on French macaroons, those soft, little dusty pastel colors.
I never even thought about that, about the macaroons. I love macaroons.
Well, now you look at the colors a little different.
Now I'm going to look at the whole thing. Now every time I watch it, it's going to make me hungry.
No, you know what Ellen first said, I think the Bridgerton should be based on macaroons. And it just fell right into place. There's not one macaroon color that you can't use.
It's true. It really is true.
Unless you burn them, then you can't.
With this, oftentimes, the stereotype I think of period pieces and period costumes is that they're very uncomfortable and things like that. Was that the case here, or did you guys do things with the costumes? Was that part of the updating of the costumes?
Well, I don't think that we did anything purpose. I mean, I think that there is a misnomer about being uncomfortable in period costumes. Number one, it depends what period it is. And number two, if there are corsets involved. Mm-hmm. And in our show, there are corsets involved. They're half corsets, not really full Victorian type corsets, although we do see one in the beginning because that Featherington mom will do anything to make sure her daughter looks excellent and looks delicious and is marriageable, if you will. But a corset always takes getting used to. It always takes getting used to. Being that this was a half corset, of course it was structured and it is a bit uncomfortable. But they do get used to it. They do get used to it. In our interpretation of the period, we worked basically from a very real foundation first, no pun intended, but a very, very solid real foundation of what was real in that period. And then we extracted from there. But one of the things that was always kept was the interior foundation. And the men have to, in the men's clothes, their cut is different as well. You know, the one thing about doing this show and having such a great group around, and having actually in our world great cutters and great fitters, is that you know the body so well, and you cut the shape, the silhouette, and everything that's needed to in the makings of the costumes so perfectly for that actor, that you take, if the shoulder is too high, if the shoulder is lower, if the back is too broad, and so on. All of those pieces are bespokely incorporated into the costume to give them as much ease as they can, unless there's some point that we're trying to make in terms of discomfort.
Mm.
And the better a suit is made or a corset is made, the better it fits. Actually, you can even move better because it gives you support.
And it's easier.
Sometimes at the end of the day, if an actress is wearing a corset and she takes it off, they'll actually miss it because it's given them a lot of support. Yeah. And men also, if you put a cheap suit on a man, you can't move your arms if it's too tight. But if a suit is really tailored well, it's very comfortable, and you can move, do whatever you need to do. But it's made for you.
Is there a particular costume for each of you that you look at it, or you saw it when it was on the actor and you were just like, you knew you'd hit the jackpot?
You know, it's difficult. You have someone, Johnny?
I said all of them. No.
I say all of them as well, because I don't. We've been asked this question before, and you know, sometimes depending on the day, you might think, well, do I like that one better? But the truth of the matter is, Tony, is that no. I mean, I'm really proud of all of them. And I think Johnny is as well. And, you know, sometimes we look at it and there isn't one necessarily that's, oh, if we only did, everything is just like a feast, like you can eat it, you know, like you can sit there, it's a banquet that you can just watch with the biggest smile. And I don't know, don't you feel that way, Johnny?
Absolutely. And you have to remember too, you know, it was not just Ellen and me. There were, you know, a person that did
200 people.
There were a lot of people that worked on every single costume, and everybody had input. Everybody had ideas.
We incorporated everything.
Yeah. So
we had a great team. We had a really great team.
There's very few pieces that were left behind, and that's why there's not many pieces that you can pick out and say that was great, because every piece was worked on almost equally, even including the background.
This is the one thing about the show, I must say, that not too many people ask about, but I really would love to bring up, and that is, on a show this size and the show that has this many principal characters, nobody really asks about the background. And the background is so very much a part of the foreground as it is the filling of the frame. And in our case, in the show, the background was as important to design and get right as the principal players. And it was because of the brilliance of this team and the brilliance of John Glaser leading the background fitting team that all of each and every person that you see on that screen has been bespokely fit and designed in the room before they go on camera. And that does not happen often. It's every single costume is a new costume. Everything is made new. Every costume that's been put together, or how you design that character, that person in front of you, has been done on the spot, bespokely, led by John Glaser and his massively brilliant fitting team.
More than brilliant.
That it's extraordinary. You look at it and you go, people that we know say, look at all those costumes oh my God, it must have been overwhelming or really hard to manage and so on. Well, it wasn't the easiest in the world. It wasn't really overwhelming, but each costume is basically hand designed and bespokely put together for that background actor. And that's why it is like probably the greatest adventure that one could ever embark upon, because you don't get that opportunity literally from soup to nuts at any other time.
Well, we certainly can't wait to see what season 2 brings. Everybody go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the Emmys, and stay tuned for more interviews with contenders throughout the season. John Glaser, Ellen Mirojnick, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.